Hi, I'm Mike Gitlin. Welcome to another episode of our Capital Ideas podcast, where we get to know the people behind the portfolios. Today, we have Judith Finegold with us. Judith is an equity analyst based in our London office, been at Capital Group just under 5 years. And today, we're going to talk about how her medical background gives her an edge to investing in biotech. Judith, welcome to the podcast. Glad you could be here.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be here.
Only 10-hour flight from London, so that's all right. We're glad you made it. We're going to do something a little different this time, and we're going to start with your investment edge. You do have a very different investment edge. Can you share that with us, please?
Sure. Maybe I'll just talk to you a little bit about my background first, because I think it explains a little bit about my investment edge. So I was at first a doctor. I worked in the United Kingdom for about 9 years, and I was specializing as a cardiologist when I left. So at the end of my work, I was also doing clinical research and doing trials, and I became very interested in kind of the interface between the trials that I was doing and what was happening in the industry, because there was actually quite a lot of overlap. And I got this idea, what if I could go and be a healthcare investor? And I call it an idea because it was a spark of enthusiasm, but that wasn't a great plan.
It was just in your mind, I have this clinical experience. Can I translate that into investing? Is that?
Yeah. So my research that I was doing was actually using a company device, and that device was very impactful to the company's stock price. So I was understanding that actually the research I was doing as a physician was also very important to the industry, and that was fascinating to me. It kind of moved on my academic interest into a whole new realm.
Do you ever miss being a doctor? By the way, I have a cardiologist. We should talk after this.
Yeah.
But do you ever miss being a doctor?
No, I don't miss being a doctor. I never regret being a doctor, and I never regret my training. I never regret spending that time there. I think it made me who I was. But I love what I do now. I find it very interesting.
Yeah, you use this experience from being a doctor, from being a clinician in some ways. So how do you translate that actually into investing?
It's core to what I do. I'm a pharma and biotech investor. So I look at companies that develop treatments for diseases, kind of drugs for diseases. So the basis of that, and at Capital Group, we do the bottom-up fundamental research. So the basis of that is understanding the drugs in their pipeline and the drugs that create revenues, and understanding how that's going to translate in the future. Are these drugs going to be successful, and what would do with the future earnings of these companies? So everything is coming down to my experience as a doctor and really understanding the medication from very early stages, even preclinical to clinical. Is that going to work in the trials? Is it going to work in patients? And that's a big jump of faith.
Yeah, that is. And when you're sitting at the table with these management teams and you're having these in-depth conversations, I guess you just have an edge in that you can go deep into the science. And you can do the financials and you can do the science. It's this interesting Venn diagram overlap between sort of financials analysts and scientists that leads you probably to ask different questions than other analysts might ask.
I think so. Obviously, if you're talking about a mega cap, the science is very important, but there's other things that you also need to ask the management team. That is also what's really going to impact the stocks of those companies. But especially for the smaller companies that are purely science-led, I mean, that is where the real hunting ground is, and that's where the real excitement. But even the large companies, they'll often bring their chief medical officers or the scientists to our meetings, and we just have really interesting conversations.
I am sure. When you take a look at U.S. biotech today, what are some things that other folks aren't really looking at that you are? What are some of the under-the-radar things that are on your mind?
Well, I'll probably give you two examples. So the first one is GLP-1s, and people may think that's old news. Everyone knows what a GLP-1 is. But do you know what the number one cause of death is in the United States?
Heart disease?
It is heart disease.
Well, see, cardiologist,
Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly. And one of the main causes of heart disease is, of course, obesity. So the unmet need of this is huge. And the way we think about things at Capital Group is really, 5 to 8 years time frame. So 5 years ago, if you'd asked me that question, I would have said GLP-1s and obesity, because that was when I started doing the research, or probably even before then. But now I'm thinking in 5 years' time, what's happening next, right? I'm not thinking about 1 to 2 years. I'm thinking about how can we improve on what we have now? Can we improve the tolerability? Is there a different mechanism that can add something else? I mean, GLP-1s are phenomenal and the data they've showed is amazing, but I'm always thinking kind of that bit far ahead. The second example I give you is completely novel. It's a target called Lp(a). So you probably know about LDL cholesterol, and everyone knows that's bad for your heart, and lots of people are on diet and exercise and statins, and there are some injectable drugs. There's another blood marker called Lp(a). It's a different kind of a lipid, and it's present in 20% of people in the world, we think. And we think it may be an independent risk factor for heart disease, but we don't know. But we are going to know this year because the first trial is going to read out from a company seeing if lowering that will prevent heart disease. And that would obviously be a huge new market, and it's something I've done a lot of research, and I'm really interested to see the results of that trial.
Could that be the GLP-1 5 years from now? I mean, is that the same? You mentioned heart disease is the leading cause of death. I mean, is that an even bigger market than GLP-1, or is it directionally similar? How should we think of that?
I think it's going to be a massive market because, as I said, it could be raised in up to 20% of the world's population. The difference with GLP-1 versus something like Lp(a) is GLP-1 is also going to be it's almost a consumer market at this point, right? People are reaching out, they understand the drugs, they understand the benefits. Whereas Lp(a) is going to be more if you had a cardiovascular event or if someone in your family has you'll go and get screened for it. But what's interesting about Lp(a) is that you can't modify it with diet or exercise. It's different to cholesterol. So that's also what makes this class of drugs very interesting and potentially critical.
All right, I'm gonna call you out on something.
Okay.
You're like, wow, I didn't sign up for that. All right, you said that small and mid-cap biotech is your favorite thing in the world. We're gonna get to the personal section later, and you have lots of other favorite things in the world. But what is it? Like small and mid-cap biotech, you get super excited about it. Why?
I mean, in general, the science and innovation is very, very rich in small and mid caps. So 50% of kind of large cap revenues generally comes from acquisitions they've done from small and mid caps. So that just shows that the ecosystem is incredibly rich in science and innovation. And that is really where I find the most energy when I look at the ecosystem. The US ecosystem of biotech is really second to none because you have this amazing pipeline of ideas also from academia, and you have combining that with the entrepreneurship of the people in the US biotech ecosystem. So it's just a fantastic stomping ground. As an investor, it's also somewhere that we can get an edge, right? You can do differentiated research and come up with very different investment theses on these companies, and the stock moves can be outsized, both on the positive and in the negative. And as a capital group investor, it's really where I have the edge because we are long-term investors. So these stocks can move 30% on a day with almost no news.
Yeah.
And if you're at a more short-term focused fund, then you maybe can't handle that volatility. But as a capital group investor, I can support the management teams as long as my thesis is not broken, and I can not worry about that volatility. And that's tremendously impactful.
So it must be interesting because that's such a big difference with small cap and large cap. And in the large cap, they have folks who obviously are super focused on the science, but they also have an M&A group that's so important to the future of the company. Where at small caps, it's about the science and getting that first drug approved to be an ongoing entity, to be a real company. When you sit down with the management teams, I'm guessing they're very different. So $100 billion market cap company versus $1 billion market cap company in the stage they are in their evolution, you must see big differences in the management teams.
Some of my biggest mistakes as an early investor was only focusing on the science, especially in the small and mid cap, because you can have a company which has the most amazing drug, and this drug has a huge future. But if you have a management team, they can destroy that future very quickly and definitely destroy value for the shareholders, whether it's through not doing the correct business development, not correct partnering, the drug, chief medical officers. You can have an amazing drug, but if you run the wrong trial, you're not going to get the results that you need. These are the things that I learned as an early investor. I was really so focused on the science, and I negated the importance of understanding that management team.
Yeah, that makes sense. You and other capital group colleagues, there's some times where you see a whole host of companies at the same time. You'll see 15 or 20 companies within a few day period. You did that earlier this year. How many meetings in that massive session? How many meetings did you do? How many people are around the table? What's the conversation like?
We just came back from doing our annual conference in San Francisco, and we're very fortunate because we do have pretty much, I think I had every large cap therapeutic United States company come to see us, and it's really a privilege that they'll give us their time and thought. It was a very interesting year this year because the energy was great. I mean, the biopharma industry has definitely been impacted by a lot of political headwinds the last few years. And instead of spending half the meeting discussing that, we could really focus on the fundamentals of the companies.
So take us into the meeting a little bit. How does it work?
It's funny because it goes back a little bit to my experience as a doctor, right? So the one thing I did as a doctor was talk to people all day. You talk to all different patients and colleagues, and everyone was from very different walks of life. So you learn how to adapt what you were saying and how you were saying things, because ultimately you want to get out you want to get to the information that you need. So I think I do definitely adapt my interviewing style depending on the management team, who is from the management team, and what I'm trying to get out from that conversation. I never have to invite questions from my colleagues. They
jump right
enthusiastic.
in, not shy.
Exactly. That is not the issue. And I never have to worry about having enough questions to fill the meeting. We're normally running on and people are trying to move us through.
So we had a previous guest on the podcast, one of our colleagues, Laura Nelson Carney, and she's in the similar space. She looks outside the U.S., you look inside the U.S. How do you work together?
So Laura, as you've mentioned, covers ex-US biopharma and I cover US, but it's the same industry, right? The companies are just domiciled in different geographical areas, but they're the same companies. And most of my companies will collaborate with her companies, or they'll be competing with her companies. So we work very closely together. We pretty much share all information. We have open invitations to share all meetings with all companies. We travel together extensively to different geographies to see different companies together. And we do a lot of due diligence together. So a few years ago, we did a huge survey a consumer survey actually on GLP-1s again, asking the consumer, how are you going to use these drugs? Mm-hmm. And we did that together, and we do a lot of projects together. It's a great partnership.
Excellent. You talked about lessons learned, and you talked about how good science can be good, but it can be failed by bad management or bad trials. What other lessons have you learned?
So I changed industries in my early 30s, and I had a perfectly good career in cardiology, right? I think my parents are still horrified.
You're a doctor, you're a cardiologist, and you're going to say, I'm changing careers, right?
And, I was very excited to get my first opportunity, and I was sat next to a 21-year-old, and that 21-year-old knew everything, and I knew nothing, right? I was new to this industry. So I learned a lot of humility, that if you want to change careers, you need to take a step back and realize you need to learn from everyone around you. So in medicine, we used to have this expression, watch one, do one, teach one, for procedures, right? So you watch a procedure, then you do a procedure, and then you teach a procedure. We used to learn from everyone around us.
Sure.
And when I came to this industry, I realized I had to learn from everybody around me in the office because everyone had more experience. And sometimes I had to be a little bit of a pain and ask people, take my models and say, what am I doing wrong? But I never found if I asked someone a question, there was anyone that wasn't happy to help me. So
in that, you had a lot of mentors because everyone's teaching you something, right? Mm. They've all been in the financial industry a long time, the way you were in the medical industry. Was there one or two mentors that stood out in your mind?
Yes, there's two mentors at Capital Group that have been really instrumental to me. The first one is Eric Stern. He is just a tremendous investor. He knows my area very well. And he asks me the tough questions. And he is someone that I go to when I want to test an investment thesis. And I just think he makes me a stronger investor.
Trial run with Eric.
Trial run with Eric. If Eric doesn't look too horrified, then.
Right.
The second one is Grant Cambridge. And Grant really helped me understand the culture at Capital Group when I moved here. He is just an amazing culture carrier. And he's also just an amazing person to get to know. He's very passionate about philanthropy. When I was last in LAO, he kind of really brought that into the offices. And I find that very inspiring.
He's a great collaborator. He just moved to the same floor I'm sitting on here in Los Angeles, and I could just see already the impact he has from just being a great collaborator. Yeah. I want to move to the office treasure hunt, and there is a picture in your office that now is in my hand, and it's also on the screen. So I'll hold it up, but I'll ask you for our listeners to describe what we're looking at.
So every summer in London, I organize a fun activity, and it's meant to be something very informal, a little bit different. It's optional. So we've done a few different things. We've done treasure hunts around London where we kind of run around London streets, and we've done escape rooms. And last summer, we climbed the O2 Centre, which is a big monument in London. And at the top of it is this amazing view of London. But this picture is not fully accurate because London summer, as everyone knows, the weather is very variable and it was actually windy and rainy.
So it looks beautiful in the picture.
Exactly. So this is a picture when we got down and they do a picture with like a green wall. So it looks beautiful and sunny. But it was still, despite that, a great event. And, my colleagues were in great humor and very enthusiastic despite the weather.
It shows the collaboration at Capital Group. The fact that you organize those, people want to spend time together, it helps build community.
Absolutely.
You're a research director. So for folks who don't know, at Capital Group, we don't have full-time research directors. We have analysts who have 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah. Being
an analyst and also acting as a research director. Can you tell us a little bit about the role?
Yeah. So I'm just finishing year 1 as a research director of the U.S. equity analysts. And as you mentioned, it's a rotating role. So most research directors will do this role for between 4 to 6 years. And then one of my colleagues that's another analyst will take over, and that colleague will be my research director in the future. It's more of a cheerleader role. We are there as a first port of call to help my fellow analysts with whatever they need help with. Sometimes it's just being someone to talk to. Most analysts need very little from their research director, but especially when we have newer analysts or people newer to the Capital Group system, you're there just really to help them along that journey.
And someone who's just joining, they came out of business school, they're an early career joiner, they're not a lateral like yourself or a later career joiner. What kind of advice do you give them early on? They're here for a month, they're looking at a sector before they do their industry review. What are the kinds of things you advise them?
Capital Group is a place where you can learn endlessly. You can learn from your equity colleagues. You can learn from your fixed income counterparts. You can learn from our macro and strategy team. So just take the opportunity to learn as much as you can from everyone around you in the office.
And what do you tell the next Judith Finegold, the next 9-year experienced cardiologist who comes into an entirely different industry and is working alongside folks who are a decade younger and learning from them? What do you tell them?
I tell them that it's okay to take a risk. Not every risk in life pans out, but if you try with enthusiasm and you keep your mind open, then you'll find your path eventually. Not everyone works out their path age 24, 25. I wish I had. My life would have been a lot easier, but that just wasn't what happened with me. And that's okay. You don't have to work things out at age 24, 25.
Different paths.
Different paths.
All right, let's get into the personal life, not too personal, but into the personal life, because I can't leave that your favorite thing in the world is small and mid-cap biotech. We have to have other things. You have a family of chickens at home. How many in the family?
6 at the moment.
6 at the moment. Is that something that was super intentional? Like, I'm going to go out and get 6 chickens and have that be a part of my life? I imagine they just didn't wander on your property.
No, they didn't. So and they're a lot of work, let me tell you.
Yeah.
In part, I blame this on my husband. He had chickens when we met. So, but I took to it with great enthusiasm. They're actually quite interesting pets, and they really do interact very nicely. And they're a little responsibility, and they are just an interesting pet to have.
Noisy?
No, not noisy. No.
Dirty?
I mean,
okay, they gotta be dirty.
They're poultry, right? They're not a house pet.
All right, so they're not in your home.
Yeah,
That's
but I
just,
I set up my little, I take to caring for them very enthusiastically. It's a little animal hospital.
All right, last one. You also like the ballet.
I do.
So where'd that come from?
It came from being a frustrated dancer that wasn't very good.
Got it. And this is a kid?
Yeah, I mean, really I think about age 3 to 4, I was both running around with my doctor's kit and also in my ballet outfit, so.
Well, you ended up being a doctor, not a dancer.
Exactly,
so I'm sure you enjoy the ballet. We're going to finish as we finish with all of our guests, Judith, and I'm going to ask you what you're grateful for. I'm going to hand you this mug that we'll send to London so you don't have to travel back with it. But what are you grateful for? What do you want to share with us?
I would give 2 things that I'm grateful for, one personal and one professional. So personally, I'm very grateful for having a very stable home life. At Capital Group, we travel all around the world. We meet amazingly interesting people. But what really keeps me grounded is coming home, having my husband nearby, my family, and a nice home, and just really having that stability. And I think in a world where many people don't have such stability in their everyday life, it makes me very, very grateful. The second thing, you mentioned that I'm the U.S. research director, and I'm just very grateful for the US analyst team that I work with because they're just teaching me so much, and it's just a great opportunity.
Excellent. Well, we're grateful that you gave up being a cardiologist and came and became an investor here at Capital Group. It is a difference maker when you have that kind of industry experience that you can bring to bear in picking companies. And also being a research director now, you have this experience and other life experience that you can help others get even better. So thank you for joining us. I'm sure people will find this interesting. I did.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for joining us, and have a great day.